Dark Souls has to be one of the most controversial statements a gamer can make. People usually either love it or hate it. Just saying Dark Souls is bound to ruin friendships. It's too hard, where's the easy mode, why can't I press pause, why do people like these games? Yeah, there's a forever ongoing battle between fans of FromSoft and haters of FromSoft. But that is not what we are here to talk about today. We are here to talk about the black sheep of the FromSoft family, Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 was actually my first introduction to the Souls series. I remember borrowing it from Thane back in the day, and oh boy, did I regret that at the moment. Dark Souls 2 was so incredibly hard for me. Not only was it stupidly hard and frustrating, but I had never played a Souls game before. I remember spending hours on the Pursuer just getting my poor little cheeks clapped over and over again. I beat him first try this time around. I've gotten way better at video games, especially FromSoft games over the years, which made playing Dark Souls 2 less frustrating this time around. But you'd still catch a few flying through my door when I was playing. It's no secret that Souls fans like to drop wet dumps on Dark Souls 2, crediting it as the worst in the Souls series. I do want to get this out of the way right from the beginning. Dark Souls 2 is not a bad video game by any means. It's quite the opposite. It's actually a very good video game. I've played bad video games, okay? I should know. That being said, there are lots of things about this game that are really frustrating and downright dumb. It's been well over a decade since I had last played Dark Souls 2. And since then, all I've heard is how bad of a Souls game it is and how much everyone despises it. So that is why I am here today, to answer the question of why does everyone hate Dark Souls 2? I have a few nitpicks that I will bring up, but I think I figured out and narrowed it down to 3 things that really piss people off when it comes to this game. Adaptability, level and boss design, the game is too hard, and the game is too easy. I've combined the last 2 into one category because one easy thing you can do is check out our Patreon, and for only $1 a month you can get years of bonus content, behind the scenes, your name at the end of our videos, and you'd be supporting us little gamer boys. Don't you want to see your name pop up at the end of our videos, Mr. Dogween32? Okay, back to the video. Thanks, Mr. Dogween. The first one I want to go over is boss and level design. Most people complain that the bosses are all very generic suits of armor. Yeah, I'd have to agree. Look, suit of armor, flying suit of armor, 2 suits of armor, 3 suits of armor, Dark Souls 1 boss, obligatory Jabba the Hutt joke. Not sure why they opted for doing most of their bosses as suits of armor, especially when they have cool designs in this game already. Look at this weird frog thing with a face, or this giant lava monster from hell, freaking dragons, this butcher meat sack thing, Medusa, a giant spider. What makes Dark Souls so cool and stands out is the different gigantic bosses that are all very unique and downright freaky. In Dark Souls 1, you had the vagina dragon, the flying butterfly, gargoyles, a freaking wolf with a sword. Dark Souls 2 has boss fights that are just kill a bunch of small enemies and call it a day. One fight had you killing a bunch of rats trying to find the main rat king, who dies just as fast as all the other rats. When you think of Dark Souls, usually the boss fights are what come to mind. Seeing a gigantic overpowered Goliath and then slaying it is such an addictive feeling. But when it's just a bunch of skeletons in a room you've already fought 100 times, but now with the health bar, it makes that supposedly unique experience boring. So yeah, the boss fights aren't as good in this game. The next thing that people complain about is the level design, and I think it's more so the lack of connectivity that the first game had. In the first Dark Souls, you memorize the level layout quickly because there is no map, but also the way that the devs design the map is great. You go exploring in areas and somehow always end up back at Firelink Shrine, unlocking shortcuts, further embedding the level layout into your memory. Plus, the level connectivity makes sense, whereas in Dark Souls 2, it doesn't. You go up elevators into the sky and come out underneath castles. It didn't really feel like the levels ever really circled back to Majula, which is the hub area. It's more like branching paths that all go out to different areas and abruptly end. For me personally, the magic elevator into the sky doesn't really take me out of the immersion. I mean, it's freaking Dark Souls, where you can use magic, summon ghosts to help you fight, and no matter how many times you die, you keep coming back. A magic elevator fits right in this world. What is disappointing is the lack of connectivity that was present in the first game. It made exploring way more valuable in the first game because you never knew if a path was going to open up a shortcut to a bonfire or Firelink Shrine. I think I figured out the reason why the devs didn't really focus so much on shortcuts and connectivity. Fast travel. In Dark Souls 2, you can fast travel to any bonfire right from the beginning, whereas in Dark Souls 1, you couldn't do that until halfway through the game. Shortcuts and level layout were way more important in the first game because of the lack of fast travel. It would have made traversing Lordran horrible if there weren't shortcuts. You'd have to walk across half the map to get to where you were going. This is definitely one of those love it, hate it moments for me in Dark Souls 2, specifically because I do enjoy the fast travel mechanic right from the beginning because they've built some things around it that I really enjoy. But also other aspects suffer from it, like level connectivity. I like to fast travel around. I like how when you talk to merchants, they will go back to Majula, so you get the all-in-one location to buy spells, upgrade weapons, and buy other items from shopkeepers. I don't like that I have to fast travel to Majula anytime I want to level up, whereas in the first game I could do it from any bonfire. The upside is, Majula is a freaking cool hub area and always makes you feel good when you go there. Despite the world connectivity, I think the levels and level designs are pretty cool for the most part, and sometimes breathtaking, with some areas being unforgettable. No Man's Wharf is a pirate cave, Lost Bastille is a broken castle, Dranglake Castle is incredible to look at. There are so many areas to go to that all look very different and make you feel like you were in completely different worlds. The designs are very cool to look at, but sometimes the layout isn't conducive to most forms of combat. Sometimes your greatest enemy in Dark Souls can be the walls. Dark Souls 2 has plenty of tiny hallways that you can't really swing a sword, so a weapon with thrust is almost always your best bet. I felt like there were so many times where I was like, man, I'm sure glad I'm using a rapier, or else this section would be a nightmare. Of course, you can use any weapon you want, and the game gives you a great selection to choose from. But keep in mind, having a thrusting weapon equipped that you can switch to on a dime isn't a bad idea. One thing that I really liked about this game as opposed to the first was I felt like there was way more world interaction that affected things. For example, you can use a torch to light this windmill on fire that makes the Medusa boss fight easier. Or you can light these two side light things that make it so you can see while you're fighting the Lost Sinner. Or you can light these pools of oil on fire that these monsters are in. Certain enemies are affected by the torch's light as well. Yeah, all the world interaction revolves around the torches, but I still think it's really cool and a good step in the right direction, making you feel more involved in the world that your actions can directly affect. So overall, the level design is cool, but the world connectivity is not cool. In Dark Souls, you really only have a couple of playstyles to do. You can block and attack back, you can dodge roll, you can parry if your timing is incredible, or you can hang back as a mage and spam magic until your enemy dies. So really, if you have bad timing, Dark Souls is going to be hard for you. But in Dark Souls 2, they made timing and invincibility frames a skill you can upgrade, which sounds cool on paper, but is terrible in practice. This little skill here, Adaptability, is dumb. It increases the speed of using items and drinking Estus and casting magic, and it increases your invincibility frames. There's a video by Zero Lenny that explains it really well that I will link in the description. Lenny lays it out perfectly though in one sentence.
How the hell can the game balance a consistent difficulty or challenge around a goalpost which is constantly moving?
He's completely right. Are developers just guessing at what certain points that maybe players would have upgraded this much adaptability? How are you supposed to balance and make bosses right? What about new players that have no freaking idea what the stat even does? I know when I first played Dark Souls 2, I never put 1 point into that stat, and even now in my second playthrough, I didn't level it up as much as I should have. This is the biggest reason as to why so many people have complained about the bad hitboxes, myself included. It felt like I was dodging at the right time, but was still getting hit, and it was frustrating. I thought my timing was off, but no, this isn't the case. My iframes were just low, so my timing had to be impeccable against certain enemies. I found some clips that showcase how big a difference this stat really makes in fights. If you don't level up adaptability, you are going to struggle through this game. But if you do level it up, you can get the roll of all time where you will never get hurt again. This affects the balance of this game and honestly breaks it with just one simple stat. They basically took a difficulty slider and made it into a game mechanic, and that sucks. And that leads me to my next points. The game is too easy and too hard. Adaptability is a huge reason why this game is incredibly easy, but also you can get infinite healing with life gems. I personally like the life gem edition, but it is broken. They are super cheap and you can buy as many as you want from the shopkeeper once you get her back to Majula. Life gems are a slow heal over time as opposed to Estus, which is immediate health, but the biggest difference is you have to stop to drink Estus compared to life gems where you can move around. Life gems heal over time, so you can even heal damage you take after you've popped a life gem. Estus doesn't work that way. Plus, you have a limited amount of Estus flasks that you can use before you need to refill at a bonfire. You can have up to 99 life gems, and if you've upgraded adaptability, you pop them faster. Like I said, I personally like the life gems, but as you can see, it's pretty broken. I think Dark Souls 2 can be one of the hardest in the series, especially for new players for a few reasons. Enemy placement and enemy quantity. This game loves to use ambushes and traps over and over and over again. In one of the first areas you go to, you walk up to this tree root and turn the corner. On your first time through, you may not see this big turtle with a hammer. Boom, dead. You run back up, dispatch the hammer guy. Awesome. You see a ladder 5 feet in front of you. Climb up, see all these items to collect. Boom, ambushed by a bunch of dead soldiers. Die and climb back up. Kill the turtle, kill the dead soldiers, boom, a big flying knight comes down and murks you. Die, run back up, kill turtle, forget about the ladder because that's worth it, walk a few more feet, boom, dead because those barrels are explosive and one of those dead soldiers is hucking bombs. In another area, you notice 2 soldiers with spears. You take them down, easy enough. Then you see an item. You go to grab it, but there's a big turtle guy hidden behind a cart. Boom, dead. Kill the soldiers, kill the turtle, then you see an item on a giant sword, you walk up to grab the item, turn around, wow, you get ambushed by more soldiers. Who would have thought? Not me. I don't understand why they kept coming back to the whole ambush thing in this game. There are trap doors that lead to nowhere, mimic chests, and ambushes all over to the point where you don't trust anything. You stab every chest, you check every single corner in the room, you check the walls, the ceiling, even bonfires can jump scare you. I think these kinds of things are fine for a few encounters, but the amount that was put in Dark Souls 2, especially in the first area, is ridiculous. I remember how hard this first area was for me when I played back in the day, and I have no idea why I kept playing. Going through it this time was a lot easier, but for new players getting into this game, it can be tough. Now, it's no secret that Dark Souls games punish you upon death. You lose all your money, you have to start back at the nearest bonfire, and all the enemies you killed respawn. As well as in the sequel, your health now slowly ticks down upon each death until it hits a fixed amount, which is minuscule, and the only way to restore your health back to full is to crack open an effigy. In the beginning, these are very limited, and for new players who are dying constantly, they will for sure run out, and then you are forced to have near perfect runs indefinitely until you can find another effigy. There is a ring that I found that makes it so when you die, your health won't go past a certain point, which was really nice. I basically kept the ring on for the entirety of my playthrough. This to me though was another dumb mechanic that they introduced that I'm glad was only in this game. I thought getting cursed in the first game was bad, which it is, but this is almost worse because the name of the game is dying, and you really feel the repercussions of it in Dark Souls 2. Enemy tracking feels so off. Enemies lock onto me, and when I dodge around their swings, it's like they turn with my dodge and hurt me anyway. I guess I just need to up my adaptability. Silly me, I'll just slide the difficulty to easy. The other issue I had with Dark Souls 2 is the fact that they just put a bunch of enemies to overwhelm the player, always. In the Lost Bastille, there are so many of these little soldiers just in one small area where it is hard to fight them all at once. Oh look, we're on a small narrow bridge. Good thing I've got my thrust weapon that I mentioned earlier so I can at least hit these guys and not the wall. Two more egregious areas in this game where they just have a buttload of enemies is the Old Iron Keep and the Shrine of Amana. The Old Iron Keep has so many of these samurai knights that hit like trucks, and they have archers all over too. So it just made it hard getting through this area, forcing you to kill everything no matter what. As bad as I thought the Old Iron Keep was, the Shrine of Amana is by far the worst. Not only are you walking in water that is too dark to see the edges so you can fall off a lot, there are enemies everywhere. Monsters in the water that you can't see very well. These mage bitches that are constantly spamming you with magic. Big guys placed all over, and remember the dark floor that you can't see, so you best be holding a torch through this area. But don't you dare dodge roll or your torch will go out. It took me way too long to get through both of these areas, and honestly makes me never want to play this game again. The other thing that I thought was terrible was some boss fights shouldn't be as hard as they were, but are hard because they are just multiple of the same enemy. Fighting more than one enemy at a time in Dark Souls is really hard. One of the hardest boss fights in the game comes pretty early on with you fighting 3 sentinels at once. As a kid, I have no idea how I got past these 3 because even now I had such a tough time getting past them. I had to summon help and play out of my ass to finally beat him. For a newer player, I have no idea how they would get past this boss fight, and in my opinion, if you've gotten past everything up till now, this would be the breaking point for most players. It felt like a lot of the difficulty was just really unbalanced. Overloading the player with enemies isn't fun, and the broken hitboxes and enemy tracking is frustrating. But if I level up my adaptability, it breaks the game and I'll never get hit again. I'm gonna get lynched for saying this, but maybe the game would have been better off just having the controversial difficulty slider instead of breaking the balance of the game. Another terrible mechanic is weapon durability. In most games, I don't really mind the weapon durability, but in Dark Souls 2, you have to manage your equipment load or you will get stuck fat rolling. It does kind of force the player to have multiple weapons and try out new ones, which is nice. But at the same time, if a weapon breaks, you cannot use it and you have to go back to the blacksmith to fix it, which isn't that big of a deal. Listen, weapon durability can work, but not in a game like this, and I'll give you the main reason why. You cannot pause the game. If you're in the middle of a fight and your weapon breaks, you can quickly switch to the next one as long as you have it equipped. Well, what happens if your second weapon breaks? Well, run like hell to get to a safe spot so you can open up your inventory and equip some new weapons. But don't hold too many, remember, fat rolling. You can hold up to 4 weapons, which is a lot, but once again, you have to manage your equipment load. It's all pretty counterintuitive. I think one of the best examples of weapon durability comes from Breath of the Wild. You don't have an equipment load that you have to manage. Sure, you are limited to how many weapons you can hold at once, but weight is a non-factor. The best part about Breath of the Wild's weapon system is once your weapon breaks, you can switch to the next one on the fly, and the game pauses while you are searching through your inventory to select the next one. Weapon durability can work, and like I said, I like the intentions behind it promoting the player to try out new weapons. But you need a pause button to switch items, especially if you are also managing your equipment load. The last few gripes I had and have with most Souls games is platforming sucks. You just fall to get to places and take damage. Jumping is a nightmare. Getting to the DLC in Dark Souls 2 is another how the f could anyone figure this out on their own, plus the DLC was just hard. Now, after all that bitching, I am confused to report that I still had so much fun playing through Dark Souls 2. It took me around 27 frustratingly filled hours to beat it, but I did and enjoyed my time. Yeah, the game is unfair or just broken with no real in-between, but the same addictive rush I got from the first game is very much present in this one. Overcoming a challenge that you've been stuck on gives you that euphoric rush. Beating the 3 sentinels, or getting to that first bonfire in the Shrine of Amana, or beating an invader's ass that is trying to ruin your game. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Dark Souls 2 is not a bad video game by any means. Is it the worst in the Souls series? Probably. But it is still a fantastic video game. The areas look really cool, the game gives you lots of weapons and consumables to mess around with, and if you do your build right, especially for new players, you can break the game and become invincible. It also has really cool cinematics to watch. Now, I don't know much about the story of Dark Souls 2, and quite frankly, I don't really care, and I'm glad that I'm finished with this one. I probably will never play Dark Souls 2 again because all the subsequent releases are significantly better. But for some sick, twisted reason, I enjoyed playing through this nightmare. And that is why everyone hates Dark Souls 2.